Hello, thank you for joining us. There is growing fallout from President Biden's decision to grant a, quote, full and unconditional pardon to his son Hunter, just weeks before he was due to be sentenced on federal gun and tax convictions. Biden announced his decision late Sunday night, despite previously insisting he had no plans to do so. The younger Biden was convicted in June for lying on a form to buy a gun. He pleaded guilty to tax evasion charges in a separate case in September. In a statement explaining his decision, President Biden said, quote, no reasonable person who looks at the facts of Hunter's cases can reach any other conclusion than Hunter was singled out only because he is my son, and that is wrong. He went on to say, quote, I hope Americans will understand why a father and a president would come to this decision. Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre spoke about the president's decision and the circumstances surrounding Hunter Biden's cases.
Two things could be true. You can believe in the Department of Justice system, and you could also believe that the process was infected politically, and that's what the president says. Remember, there was a deal on the table that the Department of Justice agreed on, and it fell apart. And his political opponents praised that deal falling apart.
President-elect Donald Trump, who himself pardoned a family member and other close allies during his first term, called the pardon an abuse and miscarriage of justice. In 2020, 1 month before leaving office, Trump pardoned his daughter Ivanka's father-in-law, Charles Kushner, who pleaded guilty in 2004 to tax charges and retaliating against a witness. On Saturday, Trump announced Kushner as his pick for U.S. ambassador to France. He also announced over the weekend he wants to replace FBI Director Chris Wray, a Trump appointee with 3 years left in his term. The president-elect announced he wants his former aide Kash Patel, who has called the FBI a threat to the people, to lead the agency. CBS News Chief Washington correspondent Major Garrett joins me now. Major, in his statement, first let's talk about President Biden and the pardon. He said the charges against his son were because he is the president's son, claiming his political opponents in Congress instigated the charges. Can you remind us how some of these cases and the conviction came to be?
Well, there's a special counsel appointed by the Justice Department to look into all Hunter Biden-related matters. And it found two instances where it believed there were charges that should be brought and tested in court. One related to lying on a report or a form to obtain a firearm and tax evasion. The one that was brought before the jury was the lying on a form to obtain a firearm. And a jury looked at those charges and said, yeah, Hunter Biden's guilty. And Hunter Biden voluntarily pled guilty to tax charges, not paying taxes for the better part of 3 years. All of those went through the judicial process, through an independent counsel appointed through the Justice Department. And in the case of the gun charge, a jury looked at that. So, yes, there were lots of charges hurled against Hunter Biden by Republicans in the House in particular, but they didn't bring the charges. They weren't on the jury. And when there was a reference by Karine Jean-Pierre to the deal falling apart, that was because a judge, doing what judges are supposed to do, evaluate a plea deal to see if it comports with process, precedent, and the law. And the judge said it didn't. Now, yes, Republicans praised that decision, but it was an independent operator within the judicial system, a judge, who unraveled that carefully constructed deal. That's not a miscarriage of justice. That's applying justice. And I know the president's unhappy about all the facts I've just described, but they are the facts. He intervened, he used the power a president has, and the political blowback is predictable.
Major, do the president's comments and Karine Jean-Pierre's comments damage trust in the institution of the Department of Justice?
Look, the Department of Justice has been battered severely in the last 4 or 5 years. It made real mistakes in the Russian collusion investigation. Mistakes that were brought to fore by an independent counsel, inspector general, looking into how the Justice Department handled that case. And then there was someone else who filed a separate report about that. Republicans, President-elect Trump and those around him find the Justice Department behavior in that case particularly egregious. There are plenty of Democrats who think, well, look, the Department of Justice brought the Hunter Biden case, brought a case successfully against a sitting Democratic Senator, Robert Menendez, and a Democratic member of the House in Texas. Does that mean that the Justice Department only goes after Republicans and not Democrats? Well, the evidence would suggest otherwise. But there is a long-running political conversation, basically from the Trump era that began in 2015 until now. What is justice in this country? Is there a two-tiered system? And does politics unduly influence prosecutorial decisions? That's a real conversation. It will not be assisted, I would point out, if in fact Kash Patel takes over the FBI, because his words alone suggest he would have a very, if not politicized, certainly vengeance-fueled approach to using the FBI powers.
And some Republicans are attempting to paint this as an unprecedented and an opening of the door for future pardons. I mean, Congressman Mike Collins of Georgia said, quote, "Don't want to hear a word when Trump pardons J6ers," referring to those convicted for the Capitol riot. Is that a fair reaction in comparison?
Well, let's deal with the January 6th expected pardons in just a second. It's not unprecedented for presidents to use pardon powers and to use it for members of their family. That's happened. You can check the historical record on that. And presidential pardon powers are plenary. That's the word the Supreme Court used, which means they're virtually unchecked. They don't apply to state crimes, but they apply to all federal offenses. So let's lay that on the table. As for expected pardons of those convicted in January 6 cases, President-elect Trump made it clear during the campaign over and over and over again he intended to do that. Will they be blanket pardons for everyone, including those who engaged in acts of violence in the U.S. Capitol on January 6th? We don't know. But you can expect them to be pretty broad. And all his Republican allies are saying is those pardon powers are real. He will use them here. And because you're supporting, if you are a Democrat, the Hunter Biden pardon, you better hold your breath. I'm not sure that's going to happen, but that'll be the Republican approach.
Major Garrett, thank you so much. For more on President-elect Trump's picks, I want to bring in Olivia Rinaldi from West Palm Beach, Florida. Olivia, who is Kash Patel and why does Trump want him as FBI director?
Hey, Lindsay, it's good to be with you. Kash Patel is seen as someone who is a fierce loyalist to the President-elect Donald Trump. He's someone who was formerly a public defender in Florida. He then went on to work for the Justice Department in the Obama years. He worked there in the National Security Division before then going on to Capitol Hill and working with Devin Nunes. And that's where he got a name for himself there, was defending Trump amid the Russia collusion investigation during his first administration. Later, he went on to work for the Trump administration on the National Security Council, along with others there. And he's picked by Trump really because of this deep distrust he has with the Federal Bureau of Investigations. It's kind of this pattern we've been seeing among several of Trump's picks, including Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to lead Health and Human Services, nominating people who are particularly distrustful of the organizations that they are now going to lead. And we know that Patel has talked about gutting the FBI, which is something unusual. Usually FBI directors, when they get in there, ask for more resources. Instead, he said he wants less resources or would in that role. He has also talked about shutting down the Edgar Hoover building in Washington and turning it into a museum for the deep state. Kind of gives you a sense of what he's looking to do there, really route the entire organization and the agency.
Trump also just picked investment banker Warren Stevens as ambassador to the UK. What do we know about him?
Yeah, it's one of the more trophy prizes of a presidential administration is to pick who your ambassador to the United Kingdom will be. It's seen as one of the prestigious roles to get in any administration. But we know that Warren Stevens is someone who's been a longtime GOP donor. But the interesting thing about him is that he donated to other Republicans, not only President-elect Donald Trump, but during the primaries, he donated to Nikki Haley, who is one of the prominent Republicans running against the former president, now president-elect. So an interesting thing there, but he did donate to Trump over the summer. It just goes to show how these mega donors can really infiltrate their influence on campaigns and then later into administrations.
Olivia Rinaldi, thank you.